Hello, everyone. Today, I just want to address a hodgepodge of different thoughts I've been having with no particular direction. So I'm just going to jumble them all together and see what you guys think. I've always wondered why we affix sexual innuendo to both our killing machines and our nation states. Fighter planes, for example, they have a long history of having women painted on them. And I have to wonder whether or not killing machines seem a bit more innocuous when they're emblazoned with women. Perhaps because subconsciously we view women as less violent than men, and this allows us, perhaps, to rationalize the dirty business of killing people with war machines. Or maybe it's because sex and violence are such closely related primal drives that we subconsciously affix sexual innuendo into our killing machines. But I think this ties back to the concept that I've talked about previously in numerous videos, that is the concept of ceremonialization of male disposability. And I think another aspect of this ceremonialization of male disposability is the male overcompensation for female mediocrity. It lies in how we affix feminine characteristics to massively complex endeavors that can't possibly come from the minds of women. Let's look at nation states. Let's look at nation states and countries and civilizations. What do we call these things? Well, they're motherlands. And it, of course, takes massive amount of male resources to install the infrastructure and the road systems and the sanitation systems and the structure of government that upholds law and order that's needed in order to build a civilization. Now, women have never erected these things, ever. And yet we speak of Rome and her satellites, and Britain and her people, and America and her ingenuity. And there's Mother Russia, right? And even our entire planet is named Mother Earth. Let's take the Third Reich's Bismarck battleship. I mean, this was a marvel of engineering. We're talking about a machine that could lob its artillery shells for miles. And this is a machine that was assigned the gender of she, as all vessels worth their salt are. And why do we do this? Women had nothing to do with it, of course. I think it's all just a coping mechanism for the demonstrable difference in ability between men and women. That's our problem. We as men, we feel sorry for them. We feel sorry for women because they just can't compete in our world. There will never be a group of female engineers forging the schematics for a Bismarck. But rest assured, a woman's going to be picked to crack the champagne bottle over its bow once it's completed. It's a lot like a doctor who, upon finishing med school, will break down crying, saying, he couldn't have done it without his wife. But what did his wife do, really? She gets all the credit, but did almost nothing. To say Mother Nature is in our nature. And I think Man Women have said it best when he says that men are deeply ashamed to brag about the aspects in which they're superior to women. But I would add to that not only are we ashamed of the aspects in which we're superior to women, but we're damn near worshipful of the aspects in which women are superior to us. And because of that shame that we have, a climate is created where women, the master mental gymnasts that they are completely happy living in a highly diluted environment where everybody around them celebrates their mediocrity and men pathetically play along. And this leads to a whole branching off of dysfunction in how men and women are treated in society. Let's talk for a second about rape. And brace yourselves, gentlemen, for this one, because I want to talk about the over-vilification of rape. Now, of course, you're going to say to me, well, how can rape be over-vilified? It's a horrible and despicable crime, and of course, I would wholeheartedly agree. But it can be over-vilified, and I'll explain how. To be clear, before I start, I do not, under any circumstances, believe rape as a punishment is ever appropriate, nor do I believe capital punishment is ever appropriate. I'm discussing these things as a thought experiment only. And if you need to understand my reasoning behind engaging in such thought experimentation, consult Aristotle's famous quote in which he said that the mark of an educated mind is to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. I've personally never liked the term playing devil's advocate because it seems to affix a negative connotation to exploration of the mind wherever it takes us for the simple fun of it. But in regards to rape, the simple fact is that rape can be recovered from. Capital punishment cannot. There are, without a doubt, children in the Congo or Sierra Leone or in Nigeria who were conscripted into brutal wars and forced to kill other children just like them and forced to rape their own mothers and sisters or even rape themselves. And surely these child soldiers are not beyond an ability to heal and lead the rest of their lives in a fulfilling manner. If they weren't, then what's the point in trying to help them recover in the first place? So if these African boy conscripts in their war-torn countries who were forced at gunpoint to kill and to rape and to be subjected to rape, so that Western men could show their servility to the female Western leisure class with diamonds and jewels. If these boys can recover, if they have a chance to recover from that in their war-torn, ravaged nations where things like rape crisis centers, for example, are non-existent, surely a Western woman who has been raped can also surmount the psychological and even physical trauma of being raped as well. Is it easy? No, of course not. Will all women or men who are raped here in the West be able to do this? No, of course not. But the whole point of me saying this is that the potential for recovery exists. There is no potential for recovery in capital punishment. And so clearly, capital punishment, that is the taking of a human life as punishment for crimes he or she committed, is in fact a worse punishment than rape by its very nature and definition. And as such, if one is to classify rape as a cruel and unusual form of punishment, then one would have to, by his own logic, be compelled to also classify capital punishment as cruel and unusual punishment. But we still murder. We take part in capital punishment as punishment for crimes committed, but we never dole out rape as punishment. Why is that? Well, let me rephrase that. We never dole out rape as punishment, at least not legally. But there's an interesting implied penalty we condemn the male sex to that gives clues as to the real reason for this curious discrepancy. We claim rape is cruel and unusual punishment, yet any convicted male rapist or pedophile, we, that is women and men alike, happily imagine him being raped in jail for retribution. Now I ask you the question, would our society permit that a female pedophile or rapist be raped? Would you see TV shows where prosecutors gleefully celebrate a female being raped in prison, even if she committed horrible crimes against children? Would our society gleefully wish it on her as she was being hauled off to jail? Of course not. Now, if our society truly viewed rape as some horrible, dehumanizing crime, truly deserving of being categorized as cruel and unusual punishment, we would never actually have our little justice porn fantasies about men who are convicted of acts of sexual violence receiving karmic retribution in our correctional facilities in the form of revenge rape. The fact is that we condemn people to rape all the time. It's just that those people are men. And although we shy away from encoding it into law, condemning a man to rape, that is, we hide it deep in the recesses of our primitive urge for vigilante justice. We dabble in the idea of condemning the male sex to rape for crimes they committed when there's no consequence and when it's socially sanctioned. And if you really look at some of the worst and savage penalties for crimes committed in our society, you'll notice that a good number of them fall just short of being enshrined into law. Because we know laws are in fact just a consensus for appropriate behavior, stemming from social law, which is just a form of implied proto-laws that can be just as potent as any official law and sometimes even more compelling in terms of influencing human behavior. Because as we all know, many a man unfortunately has committed the act of murdering an innocent man falsely accused of pedophilia or rape to defend a family member's honor, after all. And why? Well, it's partly because of the implicit demands society places on us, all of us. But in these cases, men specifically who now have a duty to be a real man and circumvent due process, because that's what a man does after all. He protects his family at all costs, even if that protection comes in the form of a mad dash to kill someone, depriving that person of his life and due process in doing so. And none of this is ever fought against by any significant portion of the male population because of what I like to call, our just deal tendency, our quote, just deal tendency. And what do I mean by that? Well, I've observed it most frequently in PUA circles. And what I've observed is really just a bunch of men all trying to act tougher than what they really are, hyper-masculine bravado, and hating anyone not towing the line. I remember a really good Spetsnaz video. I can't remember what the title is. Hopefully, if he's listening to this, he'll mention which one it is. But he said something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing heavily here. He said that the final step in getting men to be dehumanized is getting men to believe that they're lesser in the first place. And you see this a lot with this certain brand of PUA. These guys seem to revel in the disadvantaged state men find themselves in. And they claim that any men seeking to change this is disrupting some delicate balance of nature or some other such bullshit, and then they call you betas or pussies or whatever, when in reality, they're just mad that you had the balls and the wherewithal to call a shit sandwich a shit sandwich. These people, they strut around like primitive apes talking about how alpha they are, and they're competing for a shit sandwich. And anybody who points out that it's a shit sandwich is ridiculed for not liking shit sandwiches. And again, they seem to love and even revel in their disadvantaged state. They seem to revel in the way women exploit them and see them as nothing more than reproductive fodder for their own ends. And they'll tell you to your face how proud of this they are. And this is what I mean by ceremonialization of disposability. We don't say, for example, that an ox who works day in and day out on a plow, doing work that his owner couldn't possibly do on his own, we don't say that the oxen who's pulling the plow is superior to the farmer who put him under the yoke. No, we call that oxen a beast of burden, a domesticated animal. And yet these PUA types will brag about how men have built society for women, how they love the challenge of gaining female sexual validation, when that makes them exactly what the oxen is, a domesticated animal who built an entire civilization for women. The unappreciative farmer who will send us to the slaughterhouse the moment we can't pull the plow anymore. What these guys don't seem to realize is that it's entirely possible to function well and even thrive in a dysfunctional and exploitative environment in which you're the one being exploited. History is replete with this. We see the Jewish capo, we see the African house slave, all sticking it to their own kind for their individual gain. The PUAs that I'm talking about have learned to function in a society that hates men while insulting the men that either can't or won't fall in line. So again, going back to rape, the truth is that we're a very rape-friendly society. It's just that the celebration of rape is limited to men. We dole out the punishment of rape to men all the time. And on an overall basis, we expect men to recover from rape at a much, much faster rate than women do. In fact, it's taboo in our society to even imply that a woman can recover from rape. If she does recover, she's a champion, she's a survivor, but it's made clear that one should never expect a woman to recover from being a victim of rape. This isn't the case with men, however, because we see popular television shows like The Shield, where it's okay to display a man who was raped at gunpoint being told by his wife to just simply get over it. We expect men to deal with all trauma, all of it, every kind, by sucking it up and repressing it. And the only men I've observed that actually seem to get a pass on this are overly effeminate gay men. Gay men who are masculine and who are simply gay by virtue of having an attraction to the same sex, they don't seem to get the same reprieve. And I think this stems back to the fact that overtly masculine gay men are essentially indistinguishable in every facet of outward appearance to heterosexual gay men. And the only real difference, of course, is that they have an attraction towards the same sex. Now, to be clear, I'm not picking on effeminate gay men here. You know, I'm not attempting to impose any definition of masculinity on what I'm calling effeminate gay men. Now, when I say effeminate gay men, I'm referencing gay men who seem to display feminine mannerisms and body language, who essentially are physically trying to emulate the female form in various ways. I'm of the opinion that these feminine gay men do not register in the female mind. That the female mind and female society at large does not attempt to gauge their worth as male protectors and providers because they don't trigger the cues of heterosexuality that women are obsessed with controlling and manipulating. They fly under their radar, and to a degree, I think, are even assimilated unconsciously into the female collective. I want you to think back to the last time you saw a woman carrying around a masculine but openly gay man who may appear hetero to society at large. When was the last time you saw women carrying one of these men around like he was some purse accessory? The effeminate, female-emulating gay man has essentially rendered himself invisible to the selective forces of female reproductive interests, and this is done on a subconscious level, I believe, which is why I believe that women don't extend the same reprieve to gay men with masculine mannerism. It's not the fact that they're gay that compels women to extend this reprieve. It's the way they behave, and whether or not that behavior is interpreted as masculine. Now, a question that I always ask myself is what causes gay men to go along with this? Being gay is simply an attraction to the same sex, and it doesn't include effeminate mannerisms or a lisp or interior decorating or any of that foolishness. So what causes some gay men to exude these characteristics? My best guess is that some gay men take on these characteristics as an unconscious rejection of the constant cutthroat dominance hierarchy that heterosexual men impose on all other men, that most gay men will have grown up with and dealt with for most of their formative years before they even feel comfortable being openly gay. I think they see it, and I think they see how heterosexual men treat each other, and frankly, I suspect a lot of them want no part of it. They see that we treat each other like enemies. and instead choose to emulate women rather than join in the fray. And I think to a degree, because of this, their masculine identity collapses in on itself. And the only other alternative they have to express their sexual identity is through imitating women. Now, I don't fault these men. I honestly don't. And I suppose that heterosexual men can gain a lot of valuable insight into what aspects of heterosexual masculinity represses individualism. But the people that I can't stand are the quislings, these effeminate gay men who specifically have decided to make it their life's work to join up with the feminists in bashing heterosexual men, as if they're not still men, just like us. Because I assure you, if you ever decide to drop that little facade, women aren't going to treat you the same. Trust me, they're not. But that's okay, because there's this thing now, it's called men going their own way, and it's all about not allowing society to dictate what manhood is or isn't to men. So why don't you join us? That's all I gotta say for now. More to come.